Picture this. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m. and your mind is running a marathon while your body desperately needs rest. Every scenario you didn't handle perfectly today is replaying in vivid detail. Every conversation you had is being dissected word by word. Every decision you made is being questioned and re-questioned until you're drowning in doubt and paralyzed by possibilities that may never come to pass. This is the modern epidemic of overthinking, and it's destroying more lives than we care to admit. We live in a world that has confused activity with productivity, noise with wisdom, and endless mental chatter with actual thinking. But over 2,000 years ago, a Roman philosopher named Lucius Annius Seneca understood something about the human mind that we've forgotten. He knew that most of our suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but from what we tell ourselves about what happens to us. Seneca wasn't just a philosopher sitting in an ivory tower writing pretty words about life. He was a man who navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics, served as advisor to Emperor Nero, survived exile, faced assassination attempts, and ultimately was forced to take his own life by imperial decree. This was a man who knew real pressure, real anxiety, and real stakes. And yet through it all, he developed a system for managing the mind that remains as powerful today as it was in ancient Rome. Think about that for a moment. How much of your anxiety right now is about something that hasn't happened yet? How much of your overthinking is focused on scenarios that exist only in your mind? How much mental energy are you spending on problems that may never materialize? Seneca understood that the untrained mind is like a wild horse, powerful but dangerous, capable of carrying you to great heights or dragging you through the mud. But unlike modern approaches that try to suppress thoughts or distract from them, Seneca's method was about training the mind to see clearly, to distinguish between what deserves your attention and what deserves to be dismissed. The first principle of Seneca's cure for overthinking is what he called the discipline of desire. This isn't about wanting less, it's about wanting more intelligently. Most overthinking comes from our attachment to outcomes we cannot control. We replay conversations because we wish they had gone differently. We worry about future events because we desperately want them to unfold according to our preferences. We ruminate on past mistakes because we cannot accept that they happened. But Seneca taught that this attachment to controlling the uncontrollable is the root of all mental suffering. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." This isn't passive resignation, it's active wisdom. It's the recognition that your energy is finite and precious, and that spending it on things beyond your influence is not just wasteful, it's self-destructive. Consider this. When you lie awake at night, replaying that awkward conversation from 3 days ago, what exactly are you trying to accomplish? The conversation is over. The words were spoken. The outcome has already been determined. No amount of mental replay will change what happened. But what your overthinking will change is your sleep, your mood tomorrow, your ability to be present with the people you care about, and your capacity to handle whatever actually does require your attention. Seneca's second principle is the discipline of action. This is where most people get Stoicism wrong. They think it's about accepting everything passively, about becoming emotionally numb. But Seneca was one of the most active, engaged people of his time. He was a playwright, a businessman, a political advisor, and a prolific writer. The discipline of action isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing the right things for the right reasons. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect, but right now. If there's something you can do, do it. If there's nothing you can do, then your job is to train your mind to let it go. This isn't easy, but it's simple. Every night, he would review his day not to judge himself harshly, but to learn from his experiences. He would ask himself, what did I do well today? What could I improve? What did I worry about that was outside my control? This practice transforms overthinking from a destructive spiral into a constructive analysis. The third principle is the discipline of perception. Seneca understood that events themselves are neutral. It's our interpretation of events that creates our emotional experience. This doesn't mean pretending that difficult things are good. It means recognizing that you have a choice in how you frame every experience. When you catch your mind spinning in circles about a problem, Seneca would have you ask, is this thought helping me or hurting me? Is this worry based on facts or assumptions? Most overthinking falls into the latter category. We're not actually problem solving. We're just making ourselves miserable about problems that may not even exist. Seneca also understood the power of perspective. He would often remind himself of the vastness of time and space, not to make his problems seem insignificant, but to see them in proper proportion. Most of what we overthink about will be completely irrelevant in a year, a month, or even a week. This isn't about dismissing legitimate concerns. It's about not letting temporary problems consume your entire mental landscape. One of Seneca's most powerful techniques was what he called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This sounds dark, but it's actually liberating. Instead of being constantly surprised and overwhelmed by difficulties, Seneca would spend time mentally rehearsing how he would handle various challenges. Not to become paranoid or pessimistic, but to build mental resilience and reduce the shock of unexpected problems. This practice transforms anxiety from a vague, overwhelming feeling into specific, manageable scenarios. Instead of having a general fear about your career, you might think, what would I do if I lost my job? Suddenly, the fear becomes a plan, and the plan becomes empowering rather than paralyzing. Seneca also understood the importance of what we might now call mindfulness, though he wouldn't have used that term. He practiced present moment awareness not as an escape from reality, but as a way to engage more fully with what actually deserves his attention. This doesn't mean ignoring the future, it means not living in it. The difference is crucial. Planning for the future is wisdom. Worrying about the future is waste. Now let's dive deeper into how Seneca specifically dealt with the most common sources of overthinking and anxiety, and discover the practical exercises he used to train his mind for unshakable peace. The first major source of mental chaos that Seneca identified was what he called borrowed trouble. The tendency to live through future scenarios that haven't happened and may never happen. He observed that most of our suffering occurs not in reality, but in the theatre of our imagination. We rehearse conversations that never take place, we catastrophize outcomes that never materialize, and we torture ourselves with possibilities that exist only in our minds. Seneca's cure for this was radical presence. He taught that anxiety cannot survive in the present moment, because anxiety is always about what might happen, never about what is happening. More often than not, you'll discover that your anxiety is built on assumptions, not facts. But Seneca went further than just questioning anxious thoughts. He developed what modern psychology now calls cognitive reframing, the art of changing your perspective to change your experience. This single shift transforms you from victim to student, from powerless to curious. The second major source of overthinking that Seneca addressed was the human tendency to replay past events endlessly. We replay conversations we wish we'd handled differently, mistakes we wish we could undo, opportunities we wish we'd taken. This mental rumination keeps us trapped in a past we cannot change while robbing us of a present we could influence. Seneca's approach to this was both compassionate and practical. He acknowledged that reflecting on the past can be valuable for learning, but only when it's purposeful. He distinguished between productive reflection and destructive rumination. When caught in the details of a painful memory, he would zoom out and see his life from a broader perspective. He would imagine himself as an old man, looking back on this moment, or even imagine viewing his life from the perspective of someone who lived centuries ago. This practice helped him realize that most of the things we obsess over are temporary and relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of existence. The third source of mental turbulence that Seneca mastered was the need for control. He recognized that much of our anxiety stems from trying to control things that are fundamentally outside our influence: other people's opinions, external circumstances, future outcomes. This futile attempt to control the uncontrollable creates a constant state of tension and disappointment. Seneca's solution was to become ruthlessly honest about what you can and cannot control. Anything in the not up to me category was released immediately. This wasn't passive resignation, it was strategic focus. By releasing energy from trying to control the uncontrollable, he could invest that energy in areas where he actually had influence. But perhaps the most powerful tool in Seneca's arsenal was his practice of negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum. This involved regularly imagining the loss of things he valued: his health, his wealth, his relationships, even his life. This might sound morbid, but it served two crucial purposes. First, it prepared his mind for potential challenges, reducing their power to shock or destabilize him. Second, it cultivated profound gratitude for what he currently had. Seneca would spend a few minutes each morning contemplating potential losses. He might imagine losing his job, his home, or a loved one. But rather than dwelling in fear, he would use these visualizations to appreciate what he had while he had it, and to mentally rehearse responding to loss with dignity and wisdom. This practice made him anti-fragile, not just resilient to setbacks, but actually strengthened by them. Another cornerstone of Seneca's mental training was his evening review practice. Each night before sleep, he would examine the day that had passed. But this wasn't self-criticism, it was self-education. He would ask himself, what did I handle well today? What could I have done better? What did I learn? This nightly practice served multiple functions. It helped him learn from his experiences rather than just accumulating them. It allowed him to celebrate progress and acknowledge growth. And it helped him identify patterns in his thinking and behavior that might need attention. Most importantly, it kept him actively engaged in his own development rather than passively drifting through life. Seneca also understood that overthinking often stems from a lack of clear values and priorities. When we don't know what truly matters to us, every decision becomes overwhelming, and every setback feels catastrophic. He spent considerable time clarifying his core values: wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline, and used these as a compass for all his decisions. When faced with a complex situation, instead of endlessly analyzing all the variables, Seneca would ask, what would wisdom look like here? What would justice demand? What would courage choose? This values-based decision-making cut through mental noise and provided clear direction. The Stoic sage also recognized that our social environment profoundly impacts our mental state. He was careful about the company he kept, understanding that anxiety and overthinking can be contagious. He sought out relationships with people who were committed to growth and wisdom, while minimizing time with those who thrived on drama and negativity. Seneca believed that we become like the people we spend time with, so he chose his companions carefully. He looked for people who challenged him to be better, who modeled the virtues he wanted to develop, and who supported his commitment to living wisely. This wasn't about superiority or judgment. It was about recognizing that our mental habits are heavily influenced by our social environment. Finally, Seneca understood that mental training, like physical training, requires consistency and patience. He didn't expect to master his mind overnight, and he didn't judge himself harshly when he fell short of his ideals. Instead, he approached his mental development with the same dedication and persistence that an athlete brings to physical training. He would practice these techniques daily, not just during times of crisis. He understood that the middle of a storm is not the time to learn how to sail. You must develop these skills during calm weather so they're available when you need them most. Every morning meditation, every evening review, every moment of choosing wisdom over impulse was building his mental strength for future challenges. The ultimate goal of all these practices wasn't to eliminate all negative emotions or to achieve some state of robotic calm. Seneca was fully human, experiencing the full range of human emotions. The goal was to develop what he called emotional resilience, the ability to experience emotions without being controlled by them, to face challenges without being overwhelmed by them, and to maintain inner peace regardless of external circumstances. This is the gift that Seneca offers us across the centuries, not a quick fix for anxiety or a magic bullet for overthinking, but a comprehensive system for training the mind to be both strong and flexible, both passionate and wise. His techniques work because they're based on timeless truths about human nature and the reality of existence. They require effort and practice, but they offer something precious in return: the unshakable peace that comes from knowing that no external circumstance can disturb your inner tranquility unless you allow it. In our modern world of constant stimulation and endless demands, Seneca's wisdom is more relevant than ever. His cure for overthinking and anxiety isn't found in avoiding life's challenges, but in developing the mental strength to meet them with grace. The peace he discovered isn't the absence of storms, but the presence of an inner calm that remains steady regardless of what winds may blow.